Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Lepanto Institute's Anchor Team. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, and this evening we've got a great program. I have a marvelous guest, somebody that I've wanted to have on the program now for, almost a couple of months. But, life happens and things come up, and, well, we just had a baby, so what can I say? But I do have a couple of updates we're going to go over. I have... we're also going to say a special prayer for for one of our anchor team members this evening. She texted me or messaged me this evening and asked us if we could pray. So we're going to say 2 Hail Marys when we open. And before anything else, all of those who are not members of the anchor team, we meet every Thursday evening from 6:30 to 7:30. We talk about all sorts of matters that are important to the church, important to the faith. And the idea is that we pray together. We lift each other up in prayer. We're marching toward the salvation of souls to the best of our abilities. And we are looking to try and fight the good fight for the faith, for Holy Mother Church. So, we're going to go ahead and start with our prayer. But those of you who are not members, if you would like to join the Lepanto Institute's anchor team, it's just $15 a month. That's 30 cents or 50 cents a day. So less than the price of a can of soda every day. It helps us to conduct the investigations that we do. You get a great camaraderie there in the chat room. We get to talk and laugh and cry and have a good time together as faithful Catholics. So I'm going to put the link here in the chat room. It's lepantoin.org/anchor-team. So that's lepantoin.org/anchor-team. For $15 a month, you can support our work and help us to maintain everything that we're doing with the Lepanto Institute. So why don't we go ahead and start with our prayer? I want to tell you, as I said, we're doing 2 Aves this evening. The first one is going to be for our anchor team member who wrote me. She said, I want to catch you before we went live on the A team this evening. Could we say a prayer for my cousin, Trisha? So we're going to say an Ave for Trisha. She's in the hospital with a very dangerous situation as she's pregnant and there's water on her lungs. I don't know if they had to do an emergency C-section. She's 29 or 30 weeks pregnant. So we're going to pray for Trisha, and then we'll open with our regular Ave. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. And please continue to keep Trisha in your prayers. Trisha, we are praying for you. So before I get into tonight's guest, I just kind of want to give you an update on a few things that we're working on. First and foremost, I'm having way too much fun getting ready for the AUSCP's annual assembly out there in San Diego. I am going to be flying out to gather a group to protest the Association of United States Catholic Priests, who are meeting at the University of San Diego. This association, they're an organization that pushes for women's ordination. They actually endorsed the gay adoption of children. They regularly push for homosexual agendas. My mother says that it's called a perverse pleasure. Well, perverse is the operative word because these men are perverted by definition. They are perverted. They fit the mold of the modernist heresy. So they are doing everything to undermine church teaching. Anyway, I just ordered an 8-foot banner that we're going to be holding out in front of the University of San Diego. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you are in the San Diego area and you would like to join us, like to participate, please send me an email, michael@lepantoin.net. michael@lepantoin.net. Send me an email. I think that as many people as we could have come out to protest the AUSCP, we're going to be praying rosaries for their conversion because they need it. But it's going to be a great time. So that's one thing we're working on. In less than a week, let's see, we are going to, is it 1 week? So just a little bit over a week. So a week and a handful of days, I'm going to be publishing a major report. This is probably the biggest thing I have ever researched. The biggest report I've ever put together. Is probably the most important thing I've ever written about. I can't overstate that enough. This is not an exaggeration. This is not an overstatement. It is a huge story. The report's already written. It's 63 pages long. I can't quite go into the details, but it is going to be, it is going to be extremely damning. Please keep your eyes open for it, and you'll know about it when it comes. So we've got that going on, and we of course have a couple of other research projects that we're always engaged in that I can't really talk about because a little bit of knowledge spoils the recipe. So with all of that being said, why don't we get to tonight's guest, Marc Lozano, who I contacted as soon as I read an article about him in the Epoch Times. I said, this is a guy I need to know. This is someone who has an amazing conversion story. He has just an encyclopedia's wealth of knowledge when it comes to finances and the business world. And now that he is a new Catholic, and he's the kind of guy that he just tears into everything. If he has a burr in his bonnet about some sort of research he needs to conduct, he throws himself all the way into it. And he tears through everything. And he was reading all sorts of stuff about business and finance and things like that from a Catholic perspective. And what does it mean? And what implications does it have for him? He has a bachelor's and master's. He has both a bachelor's and master's degree in business and economics, international economics, I think he said. He has worked for the NBA, the National Basketball Association, for 6 years.
Can you hear me? The audio cut out.
I actually muted my mic. I don't know how I did that. Oh, hello?
There we go. All right. I can hear you.
There you go.
Very good.
So, Marc, thanks for being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I don't know where my sound cut out, but
yeah, I heard about halfway through when you said you were mentioning degrees, and then from there it went silent.
I'll tell you what, I will go ahead and let you fill in the gaps. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so well, start from the beginning. I was raised in a secular family, still very strong family values and everything like that. But I was sacramentalized a Catholic, but fell away from the faith as soon as I made my confirmation. Never went back to church until grad school, really. And I went to school for both basketball, played college basketball, and went to get degrees in international economics and business finance, both in graduate, undergraduate, respectively. And then while I was in college, I met my soon-to-be wife, Taylor, who was a cradle Catholic. And me and her fell in love pretty quickly. We were always together all the way through undergrad, grad school, stayed together, but we fought constantly about faith, morals, values. Me being at that time a militant atheist, her being a cradle Catholic, we bonded over a lot of things, but obviously faith, morals, values, we can butt heads constantly. And eventually I decided, once we got out of college, I'm like, hey, both of us are still in this relationship. We're not going anywhere, but one of us needs to cave because we can't keep going like this, fighting constantly. And me being the obsessive kind of personality that I am, I was a voracious reader, still am. And I was like, hey, I know all this Christianity, Catholic, religious stuff is nonsense. I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to convert her over to the good side, to my atheism. And long story short, read everything I could get my hands on and ended up proving myself wrong rather than her. I'm sorry, the audio keeps popping out for me. I don't know why. Sorry, I can't. Hello? There you go. Michael's going to ask me questions, and then I'm going to repeat those questions, and then we're going to do the interview this way since we're having some audio trouble. Gotcha. Just to be clear, can everybody hear us in the comments and who are listening right now? Making sure it's not my audio that's the problem. Hey, hold on, let me try. Does that work?
Okay, can you all hear? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear myself. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my video there and put you on speaker here so I can hear you. Okay, so if everybody can hear me, maybe put the phone near your microphone so people can hear you talking. I don't know what the heck is going on with my audio. The computer is telling me that there are all kinds of issues with the microphone connection, and maybe there are other apps that are trying to use it. I don't know. I haven't been on this computer in a week, so I don't know what's really going on. But so what we're going to do, we're going to conduct the interview via phone.
Yeah, so I was sacramentalized. My parents were nominal Catholics, kind of church once a month, if that, and went through baptism, confirmation, and everything. But we never took the faith seriously. And there's a bit of a background story to that. My parents were both forced to go to church, but their parents never took them. So it was just something that they were kind of forced into, and then they thought it was the same what they should do with their kids. And my parents are still together. They're great parents. They've since kind of had a conversion since my conversion, going back to church. But they're a little bit of background story to why it was so easy to, when I was 11, 12 years old, I was fighting them constantly, and they just kind of gave in pretty easily, not going back to church. And the story behind that is my sister, my one and only sibling, she's 3 years older. She was born with a brain tumor, and that brain tumor was set on her optic nerve. And to get the brain tumor out, she went blind at the age of 4. And she had to go through radiation and chemo and all this stuff at a very young age. And my parents were put through the ringer, and my mom and dad just kind of looked for a scapegoat. And when no one presents themselves, the Almighty is the easiest scapegoat to go to. So God was the one to blame of why, even though they did everything right, they didn't drink or smoke or whatever, and their baby was still born with this kind of anomaly problem, and it put our whole family through debt and a bunch of strife, and that was one of the reasons why it was so easy to get my parents to cave way back when I was in my early childhood, to get them to stop going to church. And then none of us ever went back until I went upon that my conversion around grad school years.
Wow, that's incredible. So your sister went blind at the age of 4. Was the tumor taken care of? Is she still,
Yeah, actually, if I could be so bold to ask for prayers, because she has gone 28 years. She has gone 28 years without. Ray, please. Sorry, my kids are all getting ready for bed at the moment. But yeah, my sister went 28 years without any kind of repercussions from the radiation and the chemotherapy. But June 6th, she is actually going back in for her second round of brain surgery, the second time since she's been 5 years old. And they're taking out some tumors that are a consequence of getting radiation back when she was a child.
Wow.
The doctors are very confident that they're going to be able to remove these tumors without too much problem. They said the big problem with removing these tumors would, if she had sight, she'd lose it again. But obviously she doesn't have sight anymore. So, and my sister is one of the most positive people you'll ever meet in your life. I'm actually going down. My parents and my sister live in Florida, and I'm actually going down to Florida more so to support my parents going through kind of that post-traumatic stress of reliving that situation again. My sister, though, is very optimistic.
So you, in your conversion, have your parents come back into the faith, and your sister also?
They have, yeah. My sister actually is the one who still doesn't really attend church, but my parents have come back, and they've kind of embraced that. They still at this point have a lot of questions, and are kind of learning as they go. But everyone's attempting to practice, which I can't be any more grateful for.
So tell me about some of the, because I know when we talked for almost 2 hours when I first called you after reading the Epoch Times article. tell us about some of the books that you were reading and some of the debates that you were having with your wife and how you actually wound up converting yourself by trying to convert her out of Catholicism.
Yeah, so it's a fun story. Like I said, me and my wife, we kind of fell in love over a bunch of different things, namely basketball, and fought constantly, faith and values. And I decided to convert her, and I read all the new atheists at the time. I'm talking to Hitchens and Dennett and Sam Harris and Dawkins and all those guys, and read every word they penned. And I would use those arguments against my wife, but they weren't convincing her. So I was like, you know what? I need to come at it from her point of view and start reading, the Bible. I need to start reading commentary on the Bible. I need to start reading some of these great, apologists and theologians that everyone always quotes at me, like Chesterton and Lewis and Augustine and everything. And like I said, I'm a bit of an obsessive personality. I read the catechism cover to cover, read the Bible, read, confessions and orthodoxy and mere Christianity and all these different things. And at the first time, I read all of it, but I probably understood maybe 2% of it. And that was actually one of the crucial points is, wow, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Because when you compare those writings, I always thought that the Sam Harrises of the world were probably, the most intelligent. But when I compared those writings to the Aquinas and to the Chestertons of the world, I realized from a philosophical perspective, even though I wasn't trained in the field, they're much more thorough than these new atheists, or even if I would go back to Nietzsche and Kant and these kind of people. I was like, they're much more thorough. So I needed to, this was kind of a sticking point for me of like, even though I disagree with the Chestertons and the Augustines and the Aquinas, I'm finding their arguments to be well more thought out. And I started to realize when I was like, I need to train myself in the school of philosophy. And when I started doing that, I realized that like Dawkins, Dennett, they would get C minuses in philosophy 101. And this was like mind blowing to me. And why I had that kind of unbiased approach to it is literally just because I think my wife was praying for me in the grace of God. Because one thing that I've realized is you can have 4 different people in a room, all genius level IQs, and all have different worldviews. Because people, when they get to be intelligent enough, they can articulate anything. Some people can make you believe the sky is purple or whatever it is. And I realized that, no, you need to be trained in the philosophical thought and philosophical practice to be able to discern if people are actually giving you garbage or if they're giving you truth. And that made me obsessed with that T word. I always call it the T word, truth. It made me completely obsessed with that word. And after going through all of this reading, I found myself arguing with my friends and my family who knew I was more atheist, agnostic in my approach. I found myself arguing with them when they would put out these like caricatures of Christianity. And they're like, wait, aren't you on our side? Like, why are you arguing this? And I was like, well, we can't use bad arguments to, debunk them and everything. And then I started to realize I had to be honest with myself. Even though I wasn't spiritually or emotionally a Christian at the time, I was very much an intellectual Christian.
Yep.
Very much an intellectual Christian, to where I believed in the probability of all the great philosophical arguments. I understood just how much more, I guess that would be the best word, how much more probable it is that God exists than doesn't exist. And it took me a little while to make that emotional spiritual conversion, because throughout all that reading and throughout my intellectual conversion, I never once prayed. I never once actually opened the door, so to speak, for our Lord to enter in. And when I finally found myself twisted up in knots, with my emotions battling my intellect and all that, when I finally did engage in that prayer, of that genuine, vulnerable prayer, which is much easier said than done, where you dismiss your biases and engage in prayer with our Lord. When I finally did that prayer, it was a rush. And my spirit, my emotions, they aligned with my mind. And from there, my hair's been on fire ever since.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So it wasn't, you were starting to really kind of convert through the philosophy of the church and the philosophical approach of the church's understanding of God, angels, man's soul, the relationship that man has with God. But it wasn't anything like, it wasn't a particular argument that spoke to you that said, yes, this is the truth, this is what you must believe. It was that infusion of grace that comes from a prayer of vulnerability, which is why we always say that faith is a gift. And that when you made that prayer, your gift of faith was infused in that moment. You were given that gift. And so from that, you were able to act. And it really does follow with what our Lord said, that you can do no good without me. Mm-hmm. There is no good that any of us can do without his action, without his participation. And by praying, you invited Christ in to participate. And through that, you were given the gift of faith. And so what happened next?
Yeah, what happened next is, well, at the time, me and my wife were living a somewhat cushy lifestyle. I was working for the NBA. We had gotten out of college. I started my conversion process in college, but it lasted long enough where it took me out of college. And my wife and I got married in the Catholic Church, kind of before I had that emotional, spiritual conviction, that emotional, spiritual conversion. But when I finally prayed, I found myself in a spot, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to open myself up to Christ in the first place, because I found myself in a spot where I was making money two ways. I was making money from the NBA, and I was making money from the stock market, because I was trained to be a Wall Street guy. Got a taste of that when I was fresh out of college. Didn't want any part of it, out of pure laziness on my part. No morals or anything going there, just pure laziness. I saw 70-hour work weeks, rat race, didn't want any part of it. But I was still an avid trader, and I did well for myself, whether that was by luck or what. But I realized the two ways that I was predominantly making money for my growing family were illicit. I mean, the NBA is, I love basketball. I love professional sports. But when I was on the inside, I managed money for them. I knew where the money was going. I knew where the money was coming from. And I also knew that we were an idol-making factory. I mean, that's what a lot of professional sports is. I have very harsh opinions on professional sports. I love sports in general, but that can be a conversation for another day. After living on the inside of the NBA, it's an idol-making factory. And as most things are, when they're detached from God. And then the stock market was another thing where I was like, man, the companies I'm investing in are the same things I'm complaining about when I'm talking to, my friends at church and everything. Like, these are the companies I'm complaining about, but they're the ones lining my pockets. That can't be a good thing. That can't be the right thing. So this all pushed me towards leaving the NBA and divesting everything I had, all within the course of a week. And I went to my wife, and my wife since we've been married, has been a stay-at-home mom. We had 2 daughters very, very quickly. As I think some people can hear in the chat, they're getting ready for bed. I apologize. But we had 2 daughters very quickly. We just bought a house. We got a humongous puppy. We have a Bernedoodle dog that's like 75 pounds. This is all at this time. And I'm like, I think I need to leave my job. And I think I also need to divest what we have in the market. And my wife is, God bless her, she's an amazing woman, because she said, oh yeah, I saw this coming. I was just waiting for you to make the decision yourself.
Wow.
Because she knew what the NBA was. I mean, both of us played college basketball. She knew all about it. She had come to events with me. She knew what it was, and she knew it wasn't aligning with moral convictions that I was finding in myself. And then the market, she was one of those people who the market just never made sense to her. She was like, it just seems like you're cheating in some way, shape, or form. And she's not a financial mind at all. But I went to, so I divested everything. We had just bought a house. We have these 2 beautiful little girls. My wife is pregnant with our 3rd child, our first son. And I'm like, what do I do now? I need to figure out. So I wasn't convinced that the market as a whole was bad at the moment, at that point in time. And I was like, I'm going to go work for one of these BRI firms. This is my skill set. One of these new biblically responsible investment firms that keep popping up everywhere. And I went down that rabbit hole and I realized they're not up to snuff for me. They weren't strict enough. They were still including a lot of these companies that I knew were doing illicit things, whether that be child labor overseas, or whether it be predatory lending, or whether name it, promoting LGBTQ legislation, or funding abortion groups, or whatever it is. So I was like, well, maybe I can do my own thing. And so I started my business, Christ-Centered Capital. I started Christ-Centered Capital originally as a stock picking service that would not only pick stocks that were timely investment assets, but I would morally screen those timely investment assets. Again, this was my craft and my trade of researching combined with the finance. And I started doing this. I charged $7 a month for, people to get my stock picks. And God gave me two messages at two different times. The first one was, there should not be a barrier to this information. So I was like, okay, so I need to make this free. I need to get rid of the free I need to get rid of the subscription model and just make this content free. And at the time, I was like, I'll convert this LLC into a 501c3, a nonprofit. Well, I ran into a lot of trouble. I'm not a legal mind, and I found a lot of trouble in that conversion process because I was talking religiously about financial assets. There was a lot of things that popped up out of the blue it was just a lot of pushback. I didn't have the money at the time to have lawyers on my side to figure out what the best way is. So I left it as a for-profit, but made all my content free and just asked for financial pledges to support the work. And then the second message came, and this is the one that really rocked my world and just kind of crashed everything, was I got in touch with a couple of friends over at the site New Polity. Now, I don't know if some of the people have heard of New Polity, but great Catholics over at New Polity. They're based out of Steubenville. The main two guys are Mark Barnes and Jacob Imam. Jacob Imam is a great friend of mine now, mentor really, and they convinced me through very rigorous philosophical debate that the stock market as a whole is the sin of speculation. And this, I didn't want to admit it. It is, and now I'm writing the book on the Christian case against the stock market. This has been my labor of love over the past year of writing this book from a digestible standpoint, not so much an academic standpoint, but something that can really be a conversation starter. And when I made this transition of no longer the Christ-Centered Capital was a stock picking website, and now it is converted to a philosophy of Christian investing website. And I was like, people are not going to pay for this. I'm going to need to figure out something else to do. But lo and behold, the second I made that decision and I said, hey, this is going to be a Christian philosophy website, I'm going to prove why usury, lending at interest, and why speculation and stock market investing and blind investing is wrong. Once I made that decision, I instantly got a job offer, literally within 24 hours, got a job offer to manage the finances for my local parish and the pre-K through 8th grade school that's run by the Dominican sisters right in my backyard. They said, we hear about what you're doing. We want to support you. We'll give you an office. You can work on Christ-Centered Capital, and we'll let you work here as long as you can help us manage our finances and right our ship. And so it was that confirmation that all right, God, you got me. I've listened to you, and I'm doing the right thing, at least at the moment. And so that's where we are today, writing the book, Christian Case Against the Stock Market. I am working for a couple Catholic parishes and a Catholic school in my area, and cranking out a free newsletter every Wednesday on just kind of world finances from a Christian perspective.
That's really incredible. So the process of going from being an atheist investor for the NBA to not just a Christian, but a Catholic who now sees investing in the stock market as so you were convinced by an argument regarding the sin of speculation. Please explain to us what that is.
Yeah, so I In the book, and I've had a lot of help writing this book because I don't believe I'm smart enough to complete it by myself. So a lot of very people that are wealthy in wisdom and the grace of our Lord have helped me. And when we reap where we have not sown, that means when we have profited somewhere where we have not done true productive labor. The true productive labor portion of it is when we do labor, we use our labor to produce a good or service that promotes the common good. That's the only time when a Christian should be compensated. The only time when anybody should be compensated is when we do labor to produce a good or service that promotes the common good. Because if we only use money to beget more money, which is what lending at interest or what investing in the stock market is essentially, we are causing a plethora of societal ills. And I go through each one of them in the book. There's 5 that I really, really harp on. The first one is we're promoting our already flawed human nature. We are promoting vice and greed and sloth when we use money to beget more money. We are then when we use that money to beget more money, we're causing either indirectly or directly the problem of inflation. And not only inflation is a part of economic life, but when we demand things like houses, cars, food, necessities that human beings need, inflation can be acceptable. But when we demand abstractions, which is what stocks and ETFs and 401ks are, we're demanding inflation for an abstraction that doesn't actually have utility in the real world. And this is just divorcing us from the real and putting us into the abstract. And this brings us to the next point of we're promoting abstract economics. This is really, really.
Yeah, if I could interject for just a moment, it sounds like what we're talking about with regard to speculation is not that you're speculating. So if we were to use a gold digging analogy, a spectator is one who goes out into a field and starts looking for signs that there is gold on a particular piece of property. So he spectates. He's going to sit there and chip away at a wall, or he's going to dig a little bit into an area and say, okay, well, there are certain elements here that seem to indicate that there could be gold or a gold vein that we could dig in. And then he's going to develop a mine to go and dig the gold out. And a lot of times he doesn't have the capital to deal with that to begin with, so he goes to invest, and the investors would then provide him with the financial means to dig gold, and with the idea that he is going to be producing gold at the end of the day. So there is a speculative element, but I don't think that that's what you're talking about.
No, not at all. What I'm talking about is the purely buy low, sell high, do no value added work. That's the speculation that I believe causes all these ills like abstract dominant economics, globalized society, the promotion of vices, family decay, inflation. Those are the things that practice, no matter what you're doing, it could be the stock market, it could be something good like gold, or you could talk about the cryptocurrency. If you're using it as any of those things as a speculative asset where you're just buying low, doing no labor, and then selling high, you are promoting all of these societal ills.
Interesting. So the and we definitely want to get into the kinds of societal ills because of that kind of speculation. But in other words, what you're saying is that the kind of speculation that takes place on the stock market is illusory. It's a phantasm. It's not. There isn't a real product that is being produced or created. It's just, well, I think that Microsoft is going to do better this year than Apple.
Yeah, I have millions of examples of how this takes place. I mean, from 2015 to 2019, Apple 4 times their stock price, and they did nothing in the terms of real production to justify that. There was no new facilities open. There was no new real products given out. There was just speculation of people demanding Apple stock, and that's why it 4x'd. And then you have, the things people will bring up, the recent scenarios of GameStop and AMC that happened in 2021, where GameStop is obviously a dying business and now their stock is worth $500 or whatever it was at its peak. And that was just manipulation. And people will say, oh, that's an exception. It's not really an exception. It's just taking the system to its logical end, to where you could think of it in any terms. I mean, Teslas could start blowing up tomorrow,
Right.
but the stock price would not be affected if people just continued to buy Tesla stock. It would actually go up. A stock is not tied to any real production by a company. They are completely divorced. Now, if Tesla announces they're getting a new truck out or something, of course, the investors will speculate and the stock may go up. But that is secondary. That's why it's called the secondary market.
So now what we're talking about, the secondary market, I think that there are other things we could talk about too, like the bubble market, where what happens is, and I like to use the example of real estate with the bubble market because it's the easiest one to show. And there's a symbiotic relationship between bank investments and assets or assessment value. And a lot of it has to do with manipulation from those entities who have a vested interest in either bumping up or reducing the value of a product. So you have market manipulation for the purpose of increasing your odds of making money by speculating high or low. So maybe walk us through how that symbiotic relationship works between banks and investment firms, and how the interest rates play a very vital role in all of that.
I'm thinking maybe I could give you an example that doesn't necessarily tie to banks, but may paint the picture really well. So you have this. We'll take an individual like Bill Gates. So Bill Gates has Microsoft. Microsoft is obviously one of the big tech companies. The stock price is always going up. It has gone up for a very long time, at least generally speaking. Bill Gates now owns less than 1% of Microsoft in stock.
Really?
You know what he does own? He's the biggest farmland owner in practically the world, and definitely the United States right now. It's a bait and switch. So what they're doing, and Jeff Bezos is following suit. What they're doing is they're basically like snake oil salesmen, right? They come in, they're like, hey, this magic elixir, this magic stock is going to make everybody rich. It's going to cure all the woes of the society. Buy the stock, buy the stock. Everyone buys the stock goes up. The person who originally had it, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, they then cash out. What do they buy? They buy farmland, an actual tangible good, because that's where value will always be. And that's where value will always go up, because it's an actual tangible, finite good. And that's what they're taking up. And now when everyone kind of realizes that the abstract dominant economy is a bubble economy and it's going to continually keep imploding on itself, you are going to have people like, oh, now we need to go back and buy our land and everything. And what do we see? We see skyrocketing home prices, skyrocketing property prices. And this is something that goes on so often, because so many people one of the biggest rebuttals I get to my arguments on like the stock market or usury is, but we need this stuff to fund our modern day financial system. And it's like, our modern day financial system has record levels of consumer debt at 17 trillion. It just hit 17 trillion last month or the month before. And we're like, what are we really getting out of this? Yes, we have more things, but we own less. We are being shoved into a materialist stupor. And that materialist stupor is not the common good. It's not the common good of Christianity, which is really the only common good. It is that financial stupor has stopped us from producing a society that is built to produce saints. And if we're not working to produce that society that produces saints, then we shouldn't be doing the things that we're doing. And we need to change our minds and our mindsets.
I completely agree. And with the stock market, because the idea of making money just by using money and manipulation and being sad, well, I can see it. see a trend going that way, and just having the savvy to say, I'm going to apply some money here, and just so I can constantly increase the buoyancy of my own investment.
And the one thing about the just to really touch on your bank question, the only thing people need to do, look at the difference of any major company's book value versus their market value. Any large cap stock. So the market value is what basically investors speculate it will be, and the book value is based on the real production of the company. And when you pick any major company that comes to the top of your mind, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, whatever, those two things are drastically different. The book value, which represents real, tangible, the physical world, and the market value, which represents speculation. They're astronomically different in all major companies.
And one thing that we have to also keep in mind is that many of these major corporations make a lot of their money not through licensing. A lot of it is through licensing their brand, licensing their logo. So they produce a product once. It costs them X amount of dollars to create that one product. Digital market, like software or a video or whatever it is, music, because it is reproducible on a digital level to production. It's just a matter of click and send.
Mm-hmm.
And the speculation then becomes not on the product itself, but on consumer assumption. So if you were a songwriter and you produced a song and Spotify or something like that, then everybody who goes to Spotify and downloads that song, but the people who are speculating would say, well, I think that this particular artist, so I want to invest in this artist or this artist name or something along those lines. Weird. You hear?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So anyway, what winds up happening is you're now producing no production value whatsoever. It's just a license, and these corporations are on licensed products, which aren't even really products. They're just ones and zeros.
Yeah.
What do you have to?
Well, this is my main point of when I dedicate a whole chapter to it in the book when it does come out on abstract dominant economics, and it's because the more that we divorce ourselves from God's creation and go into the binary code world and go into the abstract world, we are going to continually be put into that financial stupor that I talked about earlier, and it's really a mental stupor, because when we divorce ourselves, I mean, think about the metaverse, right? What is the metaverse for? It's constantly just taking us out of reality, because if we are taken out of reality, then we are not doing God's ordained mission for us of cultivating the land and working the land and being masters over it. We're letting other people do that job for us. And those other people do not have our best interests at heart, right? And this is why I actually gave a portion of the book to edit to someone to edit, and a really good guy. And he couldn't understand why abstract dominant economics was such a bad thing. And I was like, in 2019, National Bureau of Statistics, or I'm forgetting who came up with it, and it's been corroborated, 75% of our economic output has been in the abstract. It's been in just shareholder prices, increasing, stock prices increasing. It's been in the abstract. It hasn't been actual tangible production. And if someone can't see where that's leading us and why that is bad, I mean, there's probably a bunch of conversations that need to be had in the community dialogue.
So what do you think the remedy is? How do we fix this? Because as we're says, what happens with people that can't work, like the elderly or the disabled?
So this is obviously one of the biggest objections. And I say all the time, listen, the stock market, lending at interest has been culturally ingrained for a couple generations now, right? And
Hundreds.
yeah, and well, the stock market as it is known today, I'm going off of the invention of like the 401k in the 70s, so about 50 years. For someone like me, it was easy to detangle. I'm young. I had a little bit of know-how. I had some blessings come my way. I was able to detangle myself and still work, and provide for my family. Someone who's on the cusp of retirement or is no longer able to work, which retirement to me is a 4-letter word. If you're no longer able to work, that's different. But if you're just trying to retire early, that has, that kind of flies in the face of kind of Christian virtue. If you're able to work, but you're just choosing not to. But I want to be gentle with people when I talk about these things because, again, we're dealing with such a culturally ingrained system that it is tough to detangle. But what we need to do, what we need to do is change our mindset. And when we hear the word invest, we need to stop thinking about buying low and selling high and doing no work. What we need to start thinking about is how are we investing for the kingdom, right? How are we investing for the kingdom? And how we invest for the kingdom is we raise Christian families. We start Christian business. We engage in Christian community. And then, those 3 things are really, really what we need to be thinking about when we hear the word invest. And within that, there's going to be some financial martyrdom, as I call it, because I was one of them. I saw my own bank account kind of like start to drain. And as I made these decisions, and it hurt for a little bit, but then I realized that when you follow God's will, like he provides the daily bread. And a lot of people, they're put into this point of fear where all the financial experts and everything say you need to do this. You need to have a good 401k. You need to invest in the top tech stocks or else you're going to be destitute when you're 70. And if we're thinking of investing as raising Christian family, building Christian business, and engaging in Christian community, that's not going to be the case. And again, here's the thing, and this is kind of a tough saying, but it's kind of something that I've learned to try to live by. And that is, if you are destitute because you tried to follow God's will and God's word, then so be it. Right? Isn't that the goal? Isn't that the goal of, lay up treasures in heaven, not here on earth, because thief
Right.
and moth and decay? Like we need to accept the outcomes, because if we don't accept the outcomes of making this financial shift, this mindset of investing shift, then we're just sentencing our children and future generations to the same financial stupor that we've been in. So I don't have an easy answer. People ask for like, oh, what's alternatives to the stock market? I'm like, I don't have a 1-for-1 alternative, because I can't say stop buying low, selling high, and doing no labor in the stock market and do that over here. That's going to create the same problems. What we need to do is think about those. Now, there's people that are already retired. There are people that have already gone to, they've worked their careers and, irrevocable ignorance, right? That ignorance is, we were sold a bill of bad goods. We were sold lies. It took me a lot of mental exhaustion to come to these conclusions. And I don't expect other people to hear me talk for 10 minutes and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do the same thing. It's complicated, and it's complicated because the devil he's savvy. He's going to play the tricks and he's going to convince us of the lies. But remember, we live in the enemy's camp, and the enemy has control of it. This is his kingdom. And one of the biggest things that this kingdom has propped up is the current corrupt financial system. And the key cog in that system is exchanges.
So Mary Porter asks, is insurance on the same bad level as investing in the stock market? I had some thoughts, but I was wondering what.
So I'm a big advocate for the health share ministries out there. Those are amazing. They are actually, because you want to engage in that Christian community. That's one of the big three like alternatives, quote unquote, to the stock market. And the those health share ministries, for those that don't know, I'm sure a lot of your listeners probably do know, but they're, these 501c3s that pop up. They don't have big CEO paychecks or anything like that. They are just, hey, I'm part of it now. I've had 3 children born since I've been on the health share ministry. And I say, hey, I tell the hospital I'm self-pay. They automatically cut the bill in half because insurance is a Ponzi scheme. And then and then I go to I'm part of Samaritan Ministries. I'm not sure which ones you're familiar with, but I'm part of Samaritan Ministries. I go to Samaritan Ministries and I say, hey, I just had my 2nd child born, 3rd child born, 4th child born. And they say, okay, they give the information to a bunch of other Christians across the country. And then they support me in paying for those bills. And the next month I do the same for another family that has had a similar medical condition. And that's an amazing thing. And it's true Christians helping out each other, and we're able to pray for one another. My wife experienced 2 miscarriages, and when we put that out, I mean, the amount of love we got back in and the amount of compassion that we received from that was just so overwhelming and so beautiful, because again, I come from a bit more of a secular family. My family didn't really understand like a miscarriage, and they don't take it as a true loss of life, but like having that support system of Samaritan Ministries was a beautiful thing. So I completely push that over typical insurance every day. And I think we had a conversation about what something I have on the back burners that I really want to do is I want to extend that health share ministry idea to other types of insurance.
Definitely going to back up the program properly. But before we go, there's one other thing I want to touch on. When we look at the world economy, now I'm sure you still pay attention and you're still kind of watching trends. What do you see? What is your perception of where things are going in the world economy? Wind up.
You cut out there on the last bit of it, but I think you asked my perception on my take on the world economy as it stands right now. Yeah. Oh man, I could probably write a whole nother book about that. I don't know if you want me to. I'll try not to be long-winded here, but I'll try to be very short-winded. But I see so many bubbles popping up all over the place. From my own financial training, however good or bad that may be, like when I look at the news from around the world and from just here in the States, I just see so many bubbles popping up. I don't see any way that things end well. I know people preach the soft landing and everything. That's what the Fed wants everyone to believe. I don't see it ending well. That's my own personal take. I mean, I'm limited in my knowledge. I don't have infinite knowledge of every situation going on, but I do know that China is a real threat, because they are taking on the same ideas of Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates of buying up the farmland, which is the most valuable thing in the world. Honestly, from a commodity perspective, is farmland, because people got to eat and it's land. So it's the most valuable thing. And 3 people that are buying it up, meaning the CCP, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, and BlackRock, if you want to add a 4th, they're probably not the people you want in control of your food supply.
Right. No, these are all excellent points. I hope that my audio is holding up, because we're going to have you back on, especially with better audio next time, I hope. Everybody know how they can reach you, how they can read your.
Yeah, Christ Center Capital is the best way to go. ChristCenterCapital.com. You can also use the URL Invest for Christ. That's Invest FOR Christ.com. They both take you to the same website, and everything on there is free. We greatly appreciate financial pledges and everything like that. Not necessary. We give a free newsletter that delivers world finance from a Christian perspective every Wednesday. We also try to be a little satirical in that newsletter, because a lot of it is negative, and we like to throw a little bit of optimism in there, or a little bit of humor, because when you do talk about world finance from a Christian perspective, not a lot of it is positive, unfortunately. But that's something that we're here to change, right? That one individual by just taking on that mindset of like, this is how we should be investing, and we shouldn't be conforming to the world. We should be out of the world. We should be, operating within the world, but not of it.
All right. But why don't we go ahead and close with our prayer, and hopefully we'll have we'll have you back on. We'll do this again.
Sounds good.
Let's
Thank you.
close with our prayer. All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus, benedicta tu in mulieribus,
Sancta Maria, Mater pro nobis,
or pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right. Just wave at the camera and let you know that I will see you next week. God bless.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.